Hi, and welcome to today's podcast. We are here today, actually all three directors from Ice Blue Sky are here today. So I'm Charlotte, I'm the CEO of Ice Blue Sky.
Yeah, hi, I'm Graham. I'm one of the directors here at Ice Blue Sky.
And I'm Francesca, another director at Ice Blue Sky.
So for our inaugural podcast episode, we decided to tackle one of the really hot topics at the moment in B2B marketing, especially for technology companies, which is the obsessive measurement and tracking of MQLs in marketing. Marketing qualified leads, as you all know, and then how that then tips into sales accepted leads and sales qualified leads. And I recently saw a Forrester presentation, which is called Beyond the MQL, and I thought it was really very good. And at the end of the podcast episode, we'll put a link through to an article about it. But I thought it was really good because obviously buying and therefore selling has got a lot more challenging over the last few years. I mean, I've been in technology marketing for 28 years and far longer than I care to admit. And it has just got more difficult, hasn't it? I mean,
100%.
I remember in the 90s when I first started selling this stuff, selling technology because I was client side, you'd have one buyer, you'd probably meet them at a trade show, you'd go out for a drink, and then a couple of months later, you'd probably have a deal. I mean, that happens once in a blue moon, I suspect now. But you know, we know there are a lot more touch points. I think, was it Forrester that said up to 27 touch points now?
Yeah.
And then I think Gartner says there's between 11 and 25 stakeholders if you're selling enterprise technology into large organizations. So why, and this is one of the things I wanted to discuss today, why are we still measuring marketeers in the tech sector on single MQLs, so one MQL per account, when that's the landscape that they're faced with?
Absolutely.
It just doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't, and you touched on that, the amount of stakeholders and the people that we have to engage with, or we need to put the proposition in front of. And then you look at that diversification and the complexity of that around job titles. And within different companies, people call themselves different things. And it's about trying to map that out. And I guess what you're saying is if you get one of those people in that decision-making unit, as we would determine it, react or download something, are you saying that traditionally that is registered as an MQL?
Yeah, because if you think about it, so you got it as a marketeer, you put out a campaign. Let's say you're targeting a large global multinational, and so a real tier one company. Let's use HSBC as an example. So you're targeting HSBC, which is a broad category in and of itself because they're got so many departments and silos and geographies and regional offices and all of those things. And you're selling in a large piece of enterprise software tech. So let's say something to do with IT infrastructure. So something that covers a lot of the business. There's a lot of different buying groups in there.
Absolutely. And different interests in that as well. It's not just going to be a single buying group for a single piece of software or technology. You've got a lot of different use cases within there for a lot of different technologies as well. So it's understanding which buying group you've got associated to which opportunity.
Absolutely. And that was a lot of the focus on that Forrester report, which is focus on the opportunity mapping, not MQLs, because MQLs only show you a tiny part of the picture. Because if you're targeting a large company like HSBC and you have that traditional linear model, let's say you got an SDR, so someone reaches that magical made-up MQL threshold, because let's face it, it is completely made up. We make massive assumptions about the level of interest within an organisation based on some arbitrary score of how many things they've downloaded or what they've downloaded. But it is just made up at the end of the day. But so the MQL comes in, and let's say it's someone senior at HS. We'll stick with the HSBC example. The SDR reaches out to them. So they either can't, let's say they can't get hold of them, or that person says, no, I'm not the right person. What happens in the CRM? That MQL gets rejected.
Absolutely.
And then that account gets rejected. HSBC is not interested. So you spoke to one person out of God knows how many thousands of people at HSBC, and you've made that qualify out decision based on that one either conversation or complete lack of a conversation.
So when you say, so you're thinking, you're mapping the opportunity, you're looking at the decision making unit. At what point do you start to map out that decision making unit? Are you doing that before you start your campaign? Are you doing it once you get that initial sort of MQL like interested level?
Well, with ABM, which if you're selling large enterprise software into large enterprises, you should be doing ABM. With ABM, yes, you should absolutely be mapping those buying groups ahead of time. So you should be doing the research, looking at mapping them out, perhaps on Sales Navigator, for example, or using, just doing other desk research. Mm-hmm. So, and by functional unit. So you say, right, here is the HR buying unit, for example, here, or whatever the business functions are that you need to engage with. Because then what that allows you to do, if you envisage a circle that represents a table, and you've got that buying group, and you've got those people icons around the table. I need a whiteboard. So you say, right, we've been able to identify there are 8 stakeholders in that buying function in that large enterprise. And then you go through sort of 3 layers of measurement. So your first layer is, do we know who they are? So yes, you can assume there's an HR director. Do we know who that is? So if we do, yes, that's 1 tick. Secondly, is that person engaging with the campaign? So this is why you have to do the mapping up front, because then you can say, right, did that person respond or engage with the campaign? And then the third layer is have they then reached that MQL threshold? Because MQLs are still important. I don't think they should go away, but they should only be one part of that measurement. And I think, as we were talking about before we started recording, this has got to come from the top.
Yeah.
Because this is not a change that marketeers can make on their own. The C-suite has to understand the value of those engagements, because it's naive to rely on MQLs, in my opinion. Because if you're a CEO of a large tech company, and you're trying to ascertain who in the market is interested, and you rely solely on MQLs, you're going to miss out probably on 60% of the picture, because you're missing out on early intent. Because what's that stat that we've seen before about who's in market?
Only 5% of your total market is in the position to be buying or in that buying stage at one time. So so effectively you need to be marketing at 95% of your market, so you're ready and
that's
identifying.
Not the sweet. And that's not the sweet. We know that's not the sweet spot. If you're engaging with a client that's in market, you might be a little bit too late in the journey. You need to be talking to them, that 95% who are moving towards that 5%, but you want that communication or that conversation going earlier. One of the questions I was going to just talk about there was, we define the DMU, or the client defines the DMU who we're working for. Does the DMU of the target know that everybody's in that DMU? We know what we're trying to do and how we're trying to target them. And as we know with personalisation and trying to direct people, I guess what I'm saying is there a greater emphasis to direct these people within the organisations so they have that commonality of understanding that actually everybody in the DMU is getting this information, because they're receiving information, but they don't understand that HR might be receiving that information, or ops might be receiving that information with different stakeholders. Yeah. And certainly if those people are not talking to each other within the organisation, I wonder how important it is to sort of just focus on the awareness of what that decision-making unit is for this particular product, and sort of driving people together almost. And we talk about consensus, don't we? Getting consensus across the DMU.
Yeah.
That's got to be something that's going to become more and more important. So that's almost driving the consumption or driving the download of more information. So we were talking about before we started recording, about heat mapping. So making sure that we're not just getting engagement with just one stakeholder, that maybe we're seeing it across 2 or 3 or 4 other groups. And does that sort of accelerate then the scoring? And we're talking about MQLs here, but is it more of a scoring exercise, do you think, than it just qualifies as an MQL and an SDL's got to go and talk to that one individual.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to look at the scoring because, as I say, MQLs are still important, but they're only a part of the picture. So the scoring across multiple MQLs from the same organisation, going back to the HSBC example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to your point, Graham, do they know who else is in the DMU? It's a good question. I would say probably. If you think of a technology sale, you're going to have, and it was Foundry, wasn't it, who recently released it, of those 25 buyers, half of those are a line of business, half of those are IT.
Yeah.
So are they all engaged in every single conversation, at which point who raises this as a potential solution? It could come from anywhere within those organisations, but it is important that from the sales perspective that we're managing that DMU and we're reaching that consensus. And ahead of time, we're trying to work out who are those DMUs, and I think it's probably an organic process as well. You may not understand who they all are at the beginning, but as we go down that sales cycle, there's a role for marketing as well. I know we're straying slightly away from MQLs, but there is no longer a pass the baton. Right? It's about we're working together. There might be a marketing-led and a sales-led element, but the more we're working together and aligned, the better the results and the more accelerator we're going to see.
So one of the things that sparks off in my mind when you talk about that, Francesca, is certainly we talk about bravery, don't we, in business a lot? People feeling empowered to actually consider or to table solutions or ideas. So we might be targeting somebody lower down in the organisation, but I guess if they knew that actually the C-suite are also aware of this possibility and that they knew that the C-suite was seeing this, that they might feel more empowered to take it upstairs and say, whoever it is in the C-suite, oh, look, I've received this, but I know you've got this as well. What's your thoughts? Because, sometimes lower down you feel, should I really go to the C-suite? Should I really go and talk to them about this? So are we driving across that DMU? Are we driving an ease of conversation to drive that consensus that somebody says, look, if you've seen what I'm seeing, this could be really good for our business. What do you think?
Yeah, because it further bolsters the point that we're making, really, isn't it? Is that, you've got to look at these things holistically. You can't just do it the old-fashioned way, which is just chuck a few bits of communications out, see who responds, and then see if they pick up the phone. That doesn't work anymore, or if it does, it works once in a blue moon.
Sorry, Charlotte. I was just going to ask you a question actually before we moved slight topics. Is we were talking about absolutely for ABM, we'd map out that DMU ahead of time, which is going to be cross-functional, whether it's HR or IT, whatever it might be. What about more for demand generation or a one-to-many type approach? How do you then approach mapping the DMU and opportunity scoring in that way?
Well, because the contact funnel is upside down, isn't it, compared to, ABM compared to lead gen, it sort of flips on its head. So with demand gen, you just do it a bit retrospectively based on, because when we work with clients, we often suggest if they're not used to ABM that they start maybe with one-to-many. So you're still targeting named accounts, but you're just seeing who's engaging and who's responding. And then, so it's a form of demand gen. So then if people do respond, you can then retrospectively start to map the buying groups. And actually that's quite a useful exercise. Definitely. Because to your point a minute ago, Graham, around, helping people across different levels of the organisation, you can say, right, okay, we've had some, let's say we're targeting a retailer and we've had some engagement from retail store ops, maybe senior store managers and maybe the C-suite, just for argument's sake. So you can start doing little functional buying group mapping from that. Yeah. So you can say, again, with your little circles, with your little icons around it, okay, we can assume these people are sort of related somehow within the organisation. And then it would probably make sense that, okay, there's some gaps over here. So then you can go to your data or wherever, Sales Navigator, because then you're starting to see what you don't know. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely.
Because, and this is the other issue with MQLs, is you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So you're making what is effectively a massive qualify in, qualify out decision on one individual, that where you've got no idea of context in terms of the other people around that individual. And I think, again, sorry, Graham, going back to your question around how you do that engagement across those different levels, that's where your bottom of the funnel activity comes in. So, you know, you can do things, again, let's stick to the retail example. You've got store managers in there. You can do a survey with the store managers. You do one-to-one calls. So you're not even trying to qualify in or out at this point. You're saying, let's have a chat. You can find out that important context. You can then take that upstairs to the C-suite and say, right, we've spoken to your store managers anonymously, and here's what we've seen. So it gives sales that insight, and that they're then armed with a lot more valuable information because that's useful, isn't it, in a large organisation?
Understanding those kind of pain points and drivers to action, because ultimately that's what those salespeople are trying to do, is solve a solution, deliver some kind of outcome.
Yeah,
measurable at that point.
And also as well, sort of extending on from that point, it's doing an audit of understanding what is the content these various people within the DMUs are actually consuming. I know we did an exercise recently for a client where we've got multiple levels of content going into different stakeholders, but actually what's that commonality across all those stakeholders? And you start to then, from outside of that organisation, get an understanding actually what the pain point is that everybody's downloading or everybody's like consuming. It could be something around security, for instance, IT security. So hang on, right, okay, we thought we were going to talk about this, which could be something just to do with hybrid cloud or cloud or something like that. But all of a sudden, actually, the big pain point that seems in the organisation is security. So, hey, what we're going to do is, with the SDR, whoever's making those outreaches, or even really focusing on then what the next pieces of content are going to be to that organisation, it really starts honing it down, doesn't it? Because as we know, as salespeople, and that's, you know, a lot of what I do, you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel confident, you want to make sure that actually when you make that call, you feel right on point. You feel that actually I'm super relevant because I understand that this could be something that you're really interested in.
And that confidence, I think, is a big issue, because lots of people know that this is the sensible way to do it. Okay, we all know it because we're all living and breathing it, whether you're in marketing or sales or whatever, whether you're in the senior decision makers, common sense tells you that this works better. But what the problem is that people are not targeted on this approach. They're not compensated for this approach because it's hard, and that's why. And the mindset isn't there. So that mindset is still there of marketing needs to generate X number of MQLs, which then need to be handed over to sales and qualified into opportunities. And not only that, but we've got to do that within quarter. And despite the fact that we know we have a 2-year sales cycle, but we need to get those results in quarter. So you get this dichotomy of, well, we all kind of know the way to do it, but we're not being allowed to do it because there's so much short-termism and results are important. But we all know as human beings, and yet most of us are really bad at it. It's like when you know you've got to lose weight and you know it's going to take a little while to do, but you want results now and you get fed up after a week. So you drift off and you lose focus. And it's not any different with marketing. We all know that you're not going to sell a $5 million deal into a global enterprise within quarter. No. Yet that is the expectation that is set every quarter. And that is when salespeople, marketing people get given a hard time. So until somebody's brave enough at the top to change that compensation, measurement and mindset, where sales, and this is where I really hope the CRO role comes into play. I don't think it will, because I'm already seeing it's just another word for chief sales officer, which is a shame, because if you look at revenue enablement, it should be about all the moving parts that come together. Sales, marketing, customer experiences, we've talked about quite a lot. But until someone at the C-suite is brave enough to put that in place and measure it accordingly, and again, I'm not saying drop MQLs, I'm saying look at the whole picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I think perhaps it is moving to that direction. I think there's still the quarter by quarter thing. It still drives a lot of organisations. But I do see that at that top level, in terms of like those tier 1 accounts and things, there's a shift out to 12 to 18 month planning, strategic investments, that kind of stuff. It's not across the board, don't get me wrong. But I do think there there is movement and acceptance around that, because there has to be, because of how the buyer journey has changed, right? And how it does take that elongated period, as you were just talking about.
And I think a lot of it depends on who's funding the business. So when you've got private equity,
100%.
you've got VC funding, is it still owner led? Is it shareholder led? You know, that has a massive influence on that acceptance of reality.
Yeah.
You know, I know this is a real strong hot topic of yours, Charlotte. But,
Yes. Shall I get off my soapbox?
No, it's fine. And certainly with the role of the CRO, as being almost like that kingpin between marketing and sales. And I hope it doesn't go the way you said.
I hope it doesn't.
Because I think the energy right now in the marketplace around that role of the CRO and some of the narrative we're seeing in the marketplace, there's a lot of positivity around it. You know, one of the things that, you know, I think we should enforce in this podcast is that when we are heat mapping all of that and the download of content and the direction, are we seeing enough involvement of sales at that point? Because obviously we get into conversations with clients, don't we, where they want to they want to see the SQL, the SAL.
They do.
They
look at all that engagement
Yeah.
and they go, yeah, that's really good. And we're like, look, we've got you engaged, top 10 tier 1 companies in the UK. You know, you've got a lot of intent, you've got a lot of insight, and they're like, yeah, that's great, but where's the opportunity? Where's the lead?
But I think it's,
and you think,
I think it's, you know, the real enforcement of this, and something we need to really enforce with this, it is getting sales involved and understanding that process. When the lights start going on with an account, where we're getting engagement, where we're getting interest, where we're getting maybe driving towards that consensus, and then sales have that input. How important is that? I think it's really important.
And that's what I'm talking about when I say mindset, is getting the leadership mindset aligned to that, and the sales mindset and the marketing mindset, and stop having fear driving all of this stuff, because everyone's scared of not making their numbers, and that's what drives it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so it stops people pointing fingers and blaming each other.
Yeah,
absolutely. Because we know if we've got that alignment, we get an accelerator in growth. Definitely. So no, I totally agree. And I think it's about, to your point, it's about culture, align goals. Because if we still are goaling people in a typical way,
you're going to get
the same results. So it's about shifting the culture, shifting the mindset, shifting the underlying metrics and expectations, and they have to come from the top. The expectations and that culture does come from the top, and it does flow through. And I think there's so much both sales and marketing can gain from each other by working together in that way. If you think about the amount of research that we do in marketing, for instance, in terms of customer accounts, insights, etc., and you think about sales and how much research they need to do by looking at you know, balance sheets or whatever it might be, actually you're kind of doing the same thing. So if you're working together, there's an efficiency and actually a stronger approach when you're working together in that way. So
and it generates those more natural, organic relationships for sales. So rather than sales being order takers purely, you know, here's a lead, you know, this is what they're interested in, they can start to build proper relationships with prospects over time, so that when they do fall into that 5% that are in market, a lot of that legwork's already been done. But that's such a long-term view that I struggle to see. We see the value of it, and actually for us, that's how we do our business development and our marketing. But that's because we have the ability to make that decision and enforce that across the organisation. But in a lot of companies, that's just not there. So it'd be interesting to see what happens over the next 5 to 10 years. But I think it requires a long-term approach, which we're just not very good at in the technology sector.
I think it's the drum that you always beat is you talk about sales getting involved in this whole marketing process sooner, but marketing staying at the table longer throughout the whole process. And it's almost like, forget marketing and sales as two different disciplines, just think of it as one.
Well, that's that revenue enablement,
Absolutely.
isn't it? That's why it's such a good
and I think with revenue enablement, I think we're early days. I think, you know, we've obviously done, like you've been doing it as well as me, Charlotte, the research recently into it, and I think the term is not well known in the market. I think the understanding of what a CRO's role is probably not well understood at the moment. So I think we're in an early
100%.
stage of like immaturity, early adopters, etc. And as that becomes mainstream, there'll be more and more use cases and case studies demonstrating why that is such a good approach and what the outcome is to that business effectively, which is growth.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing, isn't it? It's having those proof points and those case studies. And I think we will see more of that come out, because both Gartner and Forrester are focused on this methodology, if you like.
Absolutely. And I think if you look, and I know we're going to touch on it in a later podcast, but if you look at it, it's quite a complex thing to do.
Yeah,
bringing together effectively 3 functions, either in cross functionality, but the visibility across the whole customer buying journey, including, adoption and all of those other things. It's not an easy thing to do, especially if you are these big tier 1 companies we're talking about with legacy systems that don't talk to each other.
Yeah.
We shouldn't,
There's
underestimate.
a scaling issue.
Yeah, and
sure.
it's about starting maybe in a pilot area and building it out, which I think is like ABM provides a great test bed to prove the model, I think.
It really does. It really does, definitely. Well, I don't think this is a problem we're going to solve today. But I'm very glad I've had an opportunity to get on my soapbox.
It's been great, actually, to do a sort of a brain download on it, actually. It's been a great sort of initial conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, food for thought.
Yeah.
Moving
sure.
away from MQLs, looking at opportunity, mapping, DMUs, and how and when we can use them in the process. I think is some really good learnings.
And let's get some feedback. People who are listening to this podcast, drop some comments into the boxes.
Yeah,
tell us what you're thinking, because
sure.
this is just our opinion. But
we'd love to hear your war stories, actually. So if you want to be on the podcast and share your own soapbox moment,
we might have to do a podcast with our own war stories as well. Actually,
well, I'm happy to share the soapbox. I'm more than happy to do that. So great. Well, thanks. And I think we've come to the end of our first podcast episode for Ice Blue Sky. So thank you. And we look forward to the next one. What are we talking about on the next one?
Well, I think it's going to be around the role of the CRO. I think that will be...
Oh, nice little segue.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we know what we should be doing.
All right. Well, I'll see you on that next conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.